The scanning revealed that the warship wasn't approaching Earth. It was fleeing from something, traveling at speeds that should tear the ancient vessel apart, its engines running at 340% beyond their designed capacity in a desperate attempt to escape. And whatever it was fleeing from was gaining on it. I'm Graham Thornton, Senior Astrophysics Analyst at Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. 38 years old, divorced twice, and the kind of guy who eats lunch at his desk because talking to people makes me remember I used to have friends. The job compensates, or it did, until the Deep Space Surveillance Array picked up something that shouldn't exist. Long-range telescopes detected a region of absolute darkness behind the warship, swallowing all light and radiation, growing larger with each observation, moving faster than anything our physics could explain. The warship's trajectory would bring it past Earth in 30 days. The darkness chasing behind would arrive 17 minutes later. I'd been pulling 18-hour shifts analysing the hull composition, trying to understand what kind of civilization builds a ship the size of Manhattan. The metallurgy alone was impossible, alloys that remained stable at temperatures that should have converted them into superheated plasma. But the damage patterns kept me awake, staring at spectroscopy readouts until the numbers looked like warnings. NASA's analysis told a story of unimaginable terror. This wasn't just a fleeing vessel, it was the last survivor of an entire armada, the only ship that escaped from a battle that destroyed a civilization millions of years more advanced than ours. The scars showed weapons impacts from technology we couldn't begin to comprehend, and deep scans revealed that the ship's AI was still functioning, still broadcasting a warning in every language it knew. 3 days to translate it. 3 days of running the signal through every linguistic algorithm we had, cross-referencing against mathematical constants, searching for patterns in the frequency modulations. When the computers finally decoded it, I wished we'd left it alone. Do not engage, do not communicate, do not observe. The silence hunts by attention. The more you look at it, the faster it finds you. We looked, we studied, we tried to understand. That was our mistake. Now it comes for everyone who saw us, everyone who knows we exist. You scanned us, you observed us, you measured us. It knows about you now. The silence is patient. The silence is thorough. The silence will finish consuming us in 30 days, and then it will spend eternity consuming everyone who witnessed our death. According to the latest observations, the darkness had changed course slightly, no longer following the warship's exact path. It was heading directly toward Earth. I printed the translation. Protocol said to file it with the analysis team first, run it through verification, schedule a briefing. Instead, I walked straight to Director Walsh's office at 2 a.m. and laid it on his desk without a word. Some things you simply don't verify, you just run. Walsh didn't look up from the translation for maybe 30 seconds. His coffee mug had a crack running through the Goddard logo that I'd never noticed before, probably because I'd never been in his office at 2 a.m. before. Outside his window, the parking lot lights cast everything in that particular shade of orange that makes you feel like you're already dead and forgotten. How many people have seen this? His voice came out flat, the kind of flat that means someone's already doing math in their head about damage control. Translation team, me, the linguist contractors in Building 12. I counted on my fingers nervously, a childhood habit. Maybe 15 people total. The scanning data? 30, 40 people across 3 departments, but they don't know about the message yet. Just the hull composition and trajectory calculations. Walsh set the paper down and rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger. He was 52, had worked through the Challenger disaster as a junior engineer, and I'd never seen him look uncertain about anything. He looked uncertain now. The silence hunts by attention, he read aloud. That's what it says? That's what the computers translated. We ran it through 6 different algorithms. They all came back with the same interpretation. I sat down without being invited, which probably broke some unspoken rule about office hierarchy that I'd never bothered learning. The warship's AI has been broadcasting this warning for however long it's been running. Could be centuries, could be millennia. And you believe it? It wasn't really a question. More like he was asking himself whether he believed it, using my voice as a mirror. I believe something destroyed an armada of ships so advanced that our entire civilization looks like we're playing with rocks and sticks. By comparison, I believe whatever did that is still chasing the last survivor. I pointed at the translation. And I believe that when something that terrified can't do anything except run and scream warnings into the dark, we should probably listen. Walsh stood up and walked to his window. The orange parking lot lights turned his reflection into something that didn't quite look human. A trick of the glass, probably. Or maybe just exhaustion playing games with my perception. I need you to stop all scanning activities on the warship immediately, he said. As of right now, call everyone who's been looking at the data. Tell them equipment malfunction. Tell them budget cuts. Tell them whatever story makes them stop looking. You think the warning is real. I think if there's even a 1% chance it's real, we can't afford to keep painting a target on ourselves. He turned back to face me. How long until the warship passes Earth? 29 days, 14 hours, give or take. And the darkness? 17 minutes after that. But Walsh... I stopped, trying to figure out how to phrase what I'd been thinking about since the translation came through. The warning says it hunts by attention. We've already observed it. We've already scanned the warship. The damage is done. He sat back down heavily. The chair squeaked, a sound like a mouse dying. Then what the hell are we supposed to do? Just wait? I don't know, but stopping observation now feels like closing the barn door after the horses have already... Don't finish that sentence. Walsh picked up the translation again, his hands shaking just enough that the paper rattled. You mentioned a linguist team. Who's running that? Dr. Yates out of Johns Hopkins. He's been consulting on the signal analysis since day one. Get him on the phone. I don't care what time it is. If this thing hunts by attention, maybe there's a way to, I don't know, hide. Camouflage, make ourselves less interesting to it. I almost laughed. Almost. You want to make Earth boring to an incomprehensible cosmic horror? I want to do something other than sit here and wait for the end of the world, Thornton. He finally met my eyes, and I realized he was scared. Actually, genuinely scared in a way that made my stomach hurt. You have kids? No, never got that far with either marriage. I have 3. Oldest just started college at Virginia Tech, studying engineering exactly like his old man. Walsh folded the translation, creasing it carefully along the lines like he was trying to make it smaller, make the words less real. I'm not going to tell them that I helped observe something that might kill everyone they know. I'm not going to have that conversation, so we're going to figure out how to fix this. And if we can't, then we'll die trying, which is better than dying while doing nothing. He stood up again, this time with purpose. Go home. Get 3 hours of sleep. Come back at 6 and bring Yates with you. We're going to need everyone who's looked at this data in a briefing room by 8. I got up to leave, my knees popping in a way that reminded me I'd been sitting at a desk for 18 hours. The door was halfway open when Walsh called my name. Thornton, that thing about not verifying, about just running. Yeah? Sometimes running is just another way to paint a bigger target. He tapped the translation against his desk. The message says, not to observe. But we've been observing it for 3 days, taking measurements, sending radar pings to map its dimensions. Every telescope we have has been staring at it. The orange parking lot lights suddenly felt colder. You think we made it worse? I think, Walsh said quietly, that we might have done exactly what they warned us not to do. And I think we need to find out what happens next before the warship gets here and shows us. I drove home with the radio off, watching the darkness between streetlights, wondering quietly if any of it was watching back. Dr. Yates looked like he'd aged 10 years since I'd last seen him 3 weeks ago. He sat across from me in the Goddard cafeteria at 5:30 in the morning, stirring his coffee without drinking it, watching the spoon go around and around like it might reveal something if he just kept looking. You're telling me that the message is a warning, he said slowly, not a greeting, not a distress call, a warning. That's what Walsh thinks. That's what I think. I pushed my own coffee away. It tasted like someone had filtered it through an old sock. The translation team got it right. The computers confirmed it. Every algorithm we have says the same thing. The silence hunts by attention. Yates finally stopped stirring. It's an interesting linguistic construction. Not it hunts those who pay attention. Not it hunts when attention is paid. The phrasing suggests attention itself is the mechanism like shining a flashlight makes you visible to something that lives in the dark. Can you unshine a flashlight? Philosophically or practically? Either. Both. I checked my watch. 6:15. The briefing started in 45 minutes. Walsh wants to know if there's a way to hide to make ourselves less visible to this thing. Yates laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh you make when someone asks if you can fix a gunshot wound with a band-aid. Thornton, we've been broadcasting radio signals into space for over a century. We've been visible to anything looking for us since before my grandfather was born, and now we've spent 3 days actively scanning something that explicitly warned us not to observe it. So we're already dead. I didn't say that. He finally drank his coffee, made a face, set it down. I said we're visible. There might be a difference. The warning suggests that observation accelerates the hunting process. More attention equals faster arrival. If we stop looking now, maybe we buy time. Time for what? I don't know. Prayer? Last words to loved ones? Building a very large bomb? He rubbed his temples. I'm a linguist, not a military strategist. You want my professional opinion? The message is sophisticated. Complex grammatical structures across multiple language frameworks. Whatever sent it was trying very hard to make sure we understood. Which means what? Which means it had hope we might listen. Yates stood up, leaving his coffee unfinished. Come on. If I'm going to help explain to a room full of government employees why we might have accidentally summoned an apocalypse, I need more caffeine and possibly a priest. The briefing room was Conference Hall C in Building 8, a windowless concrete box that always smelled faintly of mildew and broken dreams and old fear. By 8 o'clock, 47 people had crammed inside, representing every department that had touched the warship data. Walsh stood at the front next to a projector screen that showed the warship's trajectory in clinical white lines against black space. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Walsh began. His voice was steady, but I noticed he kept his hands in his pockets. Probably to hide the shaking. I'm going to be direct because we don't have time for anything else. The object we've been tracking isn't just a derelict vessel, it's running from something. And by observing it, we may have drawn that something's attention to Earth. The room erupted. Questions, protests, someone laughing nervously like Walsh had just told a joke in poor taste. I watched faces shift from confusion to disbelief to the kind of fear that makes people look for exits. Quiet! Walsh didn't raise his voice, but something in his tone cut through the noise. Dr. Yates will explain what we've learned from the translated message. Then we'll discuss our options. And yes, before anyone asks, this is classified at the highest level. Nobody talks about this outside this room without my explicit permission. Yates walked to the front, pulled up the translation on the projector. The words looked worse, written large, more real, more final. The message uses what we call experiential imperatives, Yates said. Commands derived from learned experience. Do not touch fire implies someone was burned. Do not engage, communicate, or observe implies the sender learned these things through catastrophic failure. The civilization that sent this wasn't theorizing. They were documenting their own extinction. Someone in the back raised his hand, Dr. Preston from the spectroscopy team, wearing the same Houston Rockets hoodie he'd had on for 3 days straight. How do we know it's not just trying to scare us, like a keep off the grass sign to make us ignore valuable technology? Because, I said, standing up before I'd really decided to speak, they included specificity about hunting mechanisms. The message says attention itself is the vector that's not a deterrent. That's tactical information given by someone who wants you to survive. Or wants us to stop looking so we don't see them coming, Preston shot back. If they wanted us dead, they'd have just stayed quiet and let us figure it out when the darkness arrived. Yates pulled up another slide showing the warship's damage patterns. These impact signatures suggest weapons that manipulate fundamental forces. Gravity, probably. Maybe space-time itself. Whatever fought them had technology that makes the warship look primitive, and the warship is millions of years more advanced than us. Walsh cleared his throat. Which brings us to our current situation. The darkness is 17.3 astronomical units behind the warship. It's moving at approximately 0.07 times the speed of light and accelerating. If it maintains current velocity, it will reach Earth's orbital path 31 minutes after the warship passes. Has it changed course again? Someone asked. Walsh nodded to me. I pulled up the latest tracking data and the room went very quiet. The darkness had changed trajectory twice more in the past 6 hours. Small corrections, minute adjustments, but each one brought it more directly in line with Earth's position. Not where Earth was when we started observing, where Earth would be in 29 days. It's predicting our orbit, I said. It knows where we'll be. Preston stood up, his chair scraping loud against the floor. This is insane. We're sitting here talking about invisible cosmic horrors like it's a normal Tuesday. Maybe the darkness is just a natural phenomenon, a region of exotic matter or a quantum fluctuation or... Natural phenomena don't change course, Walsh interrupted. Natural phenomena don't hunt. And natural phenomena, Yates added quietly, don't inspire that kind of damage to a fleeing warship. I've analysed the hull scarring. The ship didn't just run, it fought. Multiple weapon signatures indicate it returned fire for a sustained period before withdrawing. And whatever it was shooting at didn't slow down, didn't stop, just kept coming. The room felt smaller suddenly, colder. Someone's phone buzzed, shockingly loud, and they scrambled to silence it with shaking hands. Walsh pulled up a new image. The warship, enhanced and colorized, its hull covered in wounds that looked almost organic. Tears and gouges that seemed to curve in impossible directions. We have 3 priorities, Walsh said. First, we stop all active observation immediately. No more radar, no more scanning. We switch to passive detection only. Second, we figure out if there's any way to reduce our visibility. Maybe if we're lucky, partial attention draws less aggressive pursuit. Third, he paused, meeting my eyes across the room. Third, we prepare for the possibility that none of that matters. That the moment we scanned the warship, we committed Earth to whatever comes next. Evacuate, someone suggested. To where? Walsh asked. The darkness is following something moving at relativistic speeds. Where exactly are we going to evacuate so that it won't find us? Yates stepped forward again. There's one more thing in the message you should know about. A final line that our computers had trouble translating because it doesn't map to any known linguistic framework. The closest approximation is, silence knows what light was before light knew itself. What does that mean? Preston demanded. I have no idea, Yates admitted, but it terrified them enough to include it in their final transmission. Walsh dismissed the briefing at 9:30. As people filed out, pale and quiet, I heard someone vomiting in the hallway. The sound echoed off concrete walls, lonely and very small. I stayed behind, staring at the warship on the screen. Somewhere out there, something ancient was dying while trying to warn us. And somewhere behind it, something older was making sure no one who knew about the dying would survive to tell anyone else. My phone buzzed, a text from Walsh. My office, now. We need to talk about what we're not telling them. I looked at the warship one final time, at the wounds that curved in impossible directions. Then I turned off the projector and quietly left the darkness behind. Walsh's office felt different at 10 in the morning. Sunlight came through the window at the wrong angle, making everything look artificially staged, like we were actors pretending. Close the door, Walsh said. I closed it. He pulled down the blinds, cutting off the sunlight, and suddenly we were back in the comfortable darkness of 2 in the morning. There's something I didn't mention in the briefing, he said. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder that looked older than both of us. The kind of folder that predates computers, that suggests someone thought paper might survive longer than hard drives. This is classified at a level where even telling you about its existence could get me arrested. But if we're all going to die in 29 days, I figure the rules don't matter anymore. What is it? Background. He opened the folder. Inside were photographs, old ones, black and white and faded. They showed what looked like archaeological digs, stone structures, symbols carved into rock. In 1952, a research team in Antarctica found something under the ice. Not recent, not human, not anything that should exist according to our understanding of planetary history. I picked up one of the photographs. The symbols looked organic somehow, like they'd grown instead of being carved. What does this have to do with the warship? The symbols match. Not exactly, but close enough that our xenolinguistics team thinks they're from the same civilization. Or a related one. Walsh pulled out another photograph. This one showed a chamber, walls covered in the same organic script. They found 17 sites across 6 continents, all of them buried, all of them ancient, some of them older than anatomically modern humans. You're saying they've been here before? I'm saying they've been everywhere before. And something wiped them out so thoroughly that we didn't even know they existed until we started looking under glaciers and ocean floors. He pushed the folder toward me. Read the final report. Pay attention to the last paragraph. I skimmed through pages of technical jargon, geological surveys, carbon dating results that made no sense. Then I found the last paragraph. All 17 sites show evidence of catastrophic destruction occurring simultaneously, approximately 2.7 million years ago. Geological analysis suggests an extinction event of unprecedented scope. However, no corresponding evidence appears in Earth's geological record. The destruction appears to have been selective, targeting only structures associated with the discovered civilization, while leaving surrounding ecosystems intact. Method of destruction unknown. Recommend continued excavation and analysis. Recommend extreme caution regarding interpretation of recovered warnings. Warnings, I said. They found warnings. Carved into every site. Same message, different languages, same meaning. Walsh pulled out a final photograph. A stone tablet covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Not physically. Mentally. Like my brain was trying to reject what my eyes were seeing. Our translators worked on it for decades. They only cracked it last year using algorithms derived from the warship message. You want to know what it says? I wasn't sure I did, but I nodded anyway. Walsh read from a typed transcript clipped to the photograph. They came from the places between thoughts. They ate the knowing. When you see them, they have already seen you. When you understand them, they have already understood you. Do not give them shape with your attention. Do not give them substance with your observation. The silence hunts by attention, I finished. It's the same warning. Word for word, concept for concept, separated by millions of years and millions of light years, and the message is identical. Walsh closed the folder. Which means 2 things. First, the silence has been hunting long enough that multiple civilizations have encountered it and tried to warn others. Second, all those civilizations are gone. The office was very quiet. Outside, someone laughed, the sound distant and alien. Why didn't you tell everyone in the briefing? I asked. Because hope is a resource we're going to need, and knowing that every civilization that faced this threat went extinct doesn't help our odds. It just makes people panic faster. He met my eyes. But you're going to need to know, because I'm putting you in charge of figuring out if there's anything in these reports that might help us survive what's coming. I'm an astrophysicist, not an archaeologist. You're the person who figured out the warship was fleeing. You're the person who brought me the translation when everyone else was still trying to pretend it wasn't real. That makes you the most qualified person I have. He stood up. Take the folder. Read everything. Look for patterns. Look for anything that might tell us what the silence actually is or how to hide from it. I took the folder. It was heavier than it should have been. One more thing, Walsh said. Dr. Yates, how well do you know him? Professionally, why? Because his background check came back with some anomalies. He's been researching xenolinguistics for 20 years, but his publication record is sparse, and his funding sources are obscure. Defense contractors mostly, companies that don't usually bankroll pure linguistics research. You think he's hiding something? I think everyone's hiding something, but his credentials check out, his translations match our computer analysis, and we need him. Just keep an eye on him. Make sure he's actually trying to help us survive this and not, he trailed off. Not what? Not trying to understand the silence. Walsh sat back down, suddenly looking very tired. Because if he is, if anyone is, they might be doing exactly what the warning tells us not to do, and we won't know until it's too late. I left his office with the folder under my arm and a feeling in my stomach like I'd swallowed something poisonous that was working its way into my bloodstream. The hallway was empty except for one person. Dr. Yates, leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone with the kind of focus that suggested he wasn't actually looking at anything on the screen. "You've been waiting for me," I said. "I wanted to apologize." He pocketed his phone. "For what I said in the briefing, about prayer and priests, that was flippant. People are scared, and making jokes doesn't help." "It's fine." "No, it's not." He pushed off from the wall. "I've spent my whole career studying dead languages, trying to reconstruct meaning from fragments, and now I'm looking at a language that's very much alive, that's being used to warn us about something that kills civilizations, and I realize I don't know anything useful I can translate the words, but I can't tell you how to survive them." The folder felt heavy under my arm. I thought about the warnings carved into 17 sites, about civilizations trying desperately to leave messages for whoever came after them. "The warning says don't observe," I said. "Don't give it attention. But how do you not observe something that's coming to kill you? How do you prepare for a threat without looking at it?" "You don't." Yates glanced down the hallway, checking if anyone was listening. "That's the paradox. The warning itself creates awareness. By telling us not to look, it makes us think about looking. By describing the threat, it makes the threat real in our minds. Maybe that's why all those civilizations went extinct, not because they failed to hide, but because the act of trying to hide required them to acknowledge what they were hiding from." That's depressing. That's linguistics. Language shapes thought. Thought shapes behavior. And if the silence really does hunt by attention, then every time we discuss it, every time we think about it, we're making ourselves more visible. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. So maybe the real question isn't how to hide. Maybe it's whether hiding is even possible once you know something's hunting you. My phone buzzed, a message from Walsh. "Check the news, Building 6 now." I ran. Building 6 was the Astronomical Computing Center, a 3-story facility filled with servers and the people who worshipped them. By the time I got there, security had cordoned off the second floor, and someone was crying in a stairwell. Walsh met me at the entrance. "Dr. Harmon," he said, "from the tracking team. He was running analysis on the darkness, trying to map its trajectory." "What happened?" "He locked himself in his office 2 hours ago. Wouldn't respond to anyone. Security had to break down the door." Walsh's voice was flat, emotionless, the way people sound when emotions are too big to fit in words. He'd covered every surface with calculations. Walls, floor, ceiling, his own skin. Mathematical formulas describing the darkness's properties. Pages and pages of equations, all leading to one conclusion. Which is, the darkness isn't moving through space. Space is moving around it, like water flowing around a drain, except the drain is made of nothing and everything that touches it stops existing. Walsh handed me his phone. On the screen was a photograph of Harmon's office. The equations covered everything like an infection, spreading across surfaces in handwriting that started neat and devolved into desperate scratches. And in the center of his desk, he wrote one sentence in block letters, just kept writing it over and over until the pen ran out of ink. I looked at the photograph more closely. The sentence was simple, repeated hundreds of times. "It's already here." "Harmon's dead," Walsh said quietly. "Heart attack according to the preliminary medical report. But his eyes..." He stopped, swallowed. His eyes were open and they were looking at something we couldn't see. The folder under my arm suddenly felt radioactive. I thought about warnings carved into stone, about civilizations that went extinct trying to help whoever came next, about how observation itself might be the weapon. "We need to shut down all research on the darkness," I said. "Not just active scanning, all of it. Every computer model, every analysis, every conversation. If attention is the vector, then thinking about it might be enough." "It's too late for that," Walsh said. 47 people in that briefing. Harmon makes 48. How many of them went home and told their families? How many looked up at the stars tonight and tried to imagine what's coming? He turned away from Building 6. The moment we discovered the warship, we were already infected, and infection spreads. I looked at the folder, at the weight of extinct civilizations trying to warn us. Then what do we do? Walsh didn't answer. He just started walking back toward Building 8, and I followed, because following felt better than standing still. Behind us, someone in Building 6 was still crying softly. I spent the next 6 hours in my office with the folder spread across my desk, like evidence at a crime scene. The photographs looked worse the longer I stared at them. The symbols seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly, rearranging themselves into patterns that felt meaningful without actually meaning anything I could articulate. It was like trying to read a language that existed before language was invented. My phone kept buzzing, texts from colleagues asking if I knew anything about Harmon, calls from my first ex-wife asking if I'd seen the news about some unexplained phenomenon near Saturn that NASA was refusing to comment on. I ignored all of it and kept reading, kept trying to find something useful in the archaeological reports. The 17th site was different from the others. Found in 1989 under 2 miles of Antarctic ice, preserved perfectly by the cold. The research team had discovered not just warnings carved into stone, but what they described as a viewing chamber, a room with walls made of some crystalline substance that showed images when touched, moving pictures of something the reports called catastrophic stellar phenomena, but that the field researchers had privately referred to as the erasure. I was reading the technical specifications of the crystalline walls when someone knocked on my door. "It's open," I said, not looking up. Dr. Yates came in carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking like he hadn't slept. He set 1 cup on my desk, careful not to disturb the photographs. "You missed lunch," he said softly. "And dinner. It's 9:30. I checked my watch. He was right. Somehow 10 hours had passed since Harmon died. "I've been reading," I said, "about the Antarctic sites." It wasn't a question. He picked up one of the photographs, studied it with the careful attention of someone who knew exactly what he was looking at. "Walsh showed these to you." "How did you—" "Because he showed them to me 3 days ago, right after we decoded the warship message." Yates set down the photograph. He wanted to know if I thought the warnings were related, if the same civilization that carved symbols into Antarctic ice 2 million years ago was the same one that built the warship. "Are they?" "I don't think so. Different linguistic structures, different mathematical frameworks. But the content is identical, which suggests something worse." He sat down across from me, his coffee untouched. "It suggests the silence has been hunting long enough that multiple civilizations, separated by millions of years and light years of space, independently discovered it and came to the same conclusion about how it operates." I thought about that. About countless species across countless worlds, all encountering the same incomprehensible threat, all trying desperately to warn whoever came next. "The viewing chamber," I said. "The report mentions images of the erasure. Did you see them?" Yates was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, unlocked it, and set it on the desk facing me. On the screen was a video file labelled Site 17 Recovered Footage, 1989. "Walsh doesn't know I have this," Yates said. "I copied it from the classified servers 3 days ago, against approximately 40 different regulations, but I needed to understand what we were dealing with. You watched it." "I watched 6 seconds of it before my hand started shaking so badly I dropped the phone." He pushed it toward me. "I haven't been able to sleep since every time I close my eyes, I see those 6 seconds playing on repeat." I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the play button. "The report says the crystalline walls showed images when touched," I said. "How did they recover footage?" "They didn't touch the walls. The chamber was already active when they found it. The images were playing on loop, had been for millions of years probably, like someone set up a warning beacon and left it running." Yates leaned forward. "The footage is 8 minutes long. I only watched 6 seconds. I don't recommend watching more unless you have to." "Do I have to?" "If we're going to figure out how to survive, yes. Because the erasure isn't what we thought. The darkness isn't just empty space consuming matter. It's something that makes empty space sound preferable. I pressed play. The video was grainy, shot on equipment from the 80s, all washed out colors and VHS tracking issues. The camera focused on one of the crystalline walls, and the image playing across its surface was clear despite the poor video quality. At first, it looked like a star field. Beautiful, actually. Thousands of points of light against the black. Then I realized the scale was wrong. Those weren't stars. They were galaxies. Billions of them, stretching to infinity. And something was moving through them. Not moving through the space between galaxies. Moving through the galaxies themselves, consuming them, leaving behind regions of absolute nothing, not darkness. Nothing. The absence of space itself, spreading like cancer through reality. But worse than the spreading nothing was what happened at its edges. Where the nothing touched galaxies, the stars didn't just go out. They remembered they'd never existed. The light they'd emitted for billions of years winked backward through time, unmaking itself, as if the universe was editing its own history to remove any evidence those stars had ever burned. I watched for 6 seconds. Then I stopped the video and set down the phone because my hands were shaking too badly to hold it. "The silence doesn't destroy civilizations," I said. "It erases them from ever having existed." "Correct." Yates picked up his coffee, finally took a sip, grimaced at how cold it had gotten. "Which means the civilizations that left warnings shouldn't be possible. If they were erased, how do their warnings still exist? Unless the warnings are outside the timeline somehow, or the erasure isn't perfect." "Or," Yates said quietly, "we're seeing evidence that someone survived long enough to encode warnings into the fundamental structure of space-time itself, which suggests a level of desperation I don't like thinking about." My office suddenly felt very small, very exposed. I thought about Harmon's equations covering every surface, about his eyes staring at something no one else could see. "Harmon," I said, "he figured something out, something that killed him. He figured out that the darkness isn't moving through space. That space is being consumed by it." Yates pulled up something on his phone, showed me a screenshot of equations. I went through his calculations. He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he made one critical mistake. Which was, he tried to model the darkness mathematically to describe its properties using conventional physics, and in doing so, he created a conceptual framework that allowed him to think about it more precisely, more clearly than anyone else had managed. Yates met my eyes. He gave it definition, and the moment he understood it well enough to describe it perfectly, it noticed him. The coffee on my desk had gone cold. Outside my window, the Goddard campus was dark except for scattered lights in other buildings. Other people working late, trying to figure out how to survive. "We need to stop all research immediately," I said. "Already being done. Walsh issued the order 2 hours ago. All computers analyzing the darkness have been shut down. All tracking has been suspended. We're going radio silent on the whole thing." Yates stood up. "But it doesn't matter, because in trying to figure out how to stop observing it, we observed it more intensely than ever before. Harmon's death proves that. He looked too closely, and it looked back." "So what do we do?" "Walsh has a plan, not a good plan, but a plan." He walked to the door, paused. "We're meeting in Conference Hall C at midnight. Everyone who's still alive and hasn't broken down. He's calling it Plan Nightfall, which is either appropriately ominous or completely insane." After he left, I sat in my office with the folder and the photographs and tried not to think about the video. Tried not to imagine reality unmaking itself, stars blinking backward through time, the universe editing its history to remove any trace of what had been. The phone on my desk rang. "Walsh. Conference room, midnight. Don't be late at all." He paused. "And Thornton. Burn those photographs after you've memorized them. Physical evidence is still evidence, and evidence draws attention." The line went dead immediately. I gathered the photographs, carried them to the parking lot, and watched them burn in the metal trash barrel that maintenance used for leaves. The symbols writhed in the flames, like living things dying, and for just a moment I could swear they were trying to spell out one final warning. Then they were ash, and I was walking back inside alone, and somewhere very far away in the dark between stars, something was getting closer. 23 people showed up to the midnight meeting. Out of the original 47 from the morning briefing, 23 still had the nerve or the stupidity to keep going. The rest had either broken down completely, fled, or were sitting in their homes waiting for the end, like Harmon had. Walsh stood at the front of Conference Hall C with a laptop connected to the projector. Behind him, the screen showed the warship magnified to show hull damage with structure and geometry that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. "Thank you for coming," Walsh said. His voice was steady, but he'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves completely. "We're going to do something incredibly dangerous and probably stupid. Anyone who wants to leave before I explain, now's your chance." Nobody moved at all. Plan Nightfall is simple in concept, catastrophic in execution. He pulled up a trajectory map showing the warship's path, Earth's position, and a red vector intersecting both. "We're going to intercept the warship." The room erupted. Questions, protests, nervous laughter. Yates stood up. "That's suicide. The warship is moving at 0.28 times light speed. We can't match that velocity." "We don't need to match it. We need to get close enough to transmit." Walsh clicked to technical specifications. DARPA developed a prototype communications array called WhisperNet Quantum Entangled Transmission with infinite bandwidth. We never deployed it because power requirements were insane and margin for error was zero. "You want to talk to the warship?" I said. "I want to ask it questions, specifically if they figured out how to hide from the silence, if they learned anything that might help us survive 28 days. Walsh pulled up the WhisperNet array. "We launch a probe carrying the array, boost it to maximum velocity, and pray it gets close enough to establish contact before the silence notices." "The silence will notice," someone said from the back. Dr. Preston. "We'll be actively observing the warship, broadcasting signals, drawing attention. Everything the warning told us not to do." "We're already drawing attention," Walsh shot back. "Harmon proved that. At this point, our choice is between hiding and hoping, or trying to learn something that might save us. I choose learning." Yates walked to the front. "How long to assemble WhisperNet?" 4 days working around the clock, another 3 to launch and reach intercept." Walsh met his eyes. 7 days until first contact. The warship will be close enough that if something goes wrong, we'll know within hours." "And if it does react? Then we'll have learned something valuable before we die." The room went very quiet. I stood up, my chair scraping. "I'm in, what do you need?" Walsh smiled grimly. "Lead the transmission team, write the questions, coordinate with Yates on linguistics, and monitor the silence while we do this. If it changes course, accelerates, anything, you'll be first to know." "You want me to watch the thing that killed Harmon?" "I want someone who understands the risks and will sound the alarm. You're cautious. That's what we need." He pulled up names and roles. "My name at the top. We start tomorrow at 0600. Get some sleep." The meeting ended at 1:30. People filed out slowly, talking quietly, making plans for what might be their last project ever. Yates caught my arm as I was leaving. "Walk with me," he said. We ended up on the roof of Building 8, looking out at the dark campus. Somewhere overhead, invisible to us but tracked by telescopes worldwide, the warship was getting closer, and behind it, something worse. "Walsh is lying," Yates said quietly. "About what?" "About WhisperNet." I looked up the specifications while he was talking. The power requirements aren't just insane, they're impossible. Even with every nuclear reactor on the eastern seaboard feeding it, we couldn't generate enough output to transmit at the bandwidth he's describing. He lit a cigarette, hands shaking. Which means either he's desperate and grasping at straws, or WhisperNet does something else entirely. Like what? I don't know, but I spent 3 years working for defense contractors before Walsh recruited me. I've seen black projects. I know what it looks like when someone's describing a weapon and calling it a communication device. He took a long drag, smoke curling up into the darkness. What if Plan Nightfall isn't about asking questions? What if it's about trying to destroy the warship before it reaches Earth? I thought about that, about the desperate mathematics of trying to stop something moving at relativistic speeds, about what kind of weapon you'd need to even scratch something that had survived millions of years of running. That would be stupid, I said. The warship isn't our enemy, it's trying to warn us. Unless the warning itself is the trap, unless by listening to it, by following its instructions not to observe, we make ourselves helpless to whatever comes next. Yates flicked his cigarette off the roof, watched the ember fall. I'm not saying Walsh is wrong, I'm saying we don't know enough to trust anyone's judgment right now, including our own. My phone buzzed. A text from Walsh. My office. Now. Both of you. We found Walsh sitting in the dark, his computer screen the only light. On the screen was a live feed from one of the deep space telescopes still tracking the darkness. It changed course again, Walsh said. 20 minutes ago. Third correction in 12 hours. I looked at the trajectory plot. The darkness was no longer heading for where Earth would be in 28 days. It was heading for where Earth would be in 7 days. The exact time WhisperNet would attempt first contact with the warship. It knows, I said. It knows what we're planning. Impossible, we just decided tonight. The meeting was secure, there's no way. Walsh stopped, stared at the screen. Unless it's not reacting to our plans, unless it's anticipating them. Reading our intentions from our behavior patterns. Or, Yates said quietly, someone told it what we're planning. We both turned to look at him. I'm not suggesting anyone here is a traitor, he said quickly. I'm suggesting that the silence might not need a traitor. If it hunts by attention, if understanding is the vector, then maybe it can read our thoughts once we've thought too clearly about it. Maybe Harmon didn't die from looking. Maybe he died from being read. Walsh closed his laptop. That's a terrifying theory with absolutely no evidence supporting it. Harmon's equations support it. He understood the darkness well enough to model it, and the moment his understanding was complete, he died. What if the act of perfect understanding creates a connection? What if by figuring out exactly what the silence is, you give it a window directly into your mind? Then we're already dead, I said, because we've all been thinking about it, trying to understand it, following the exact path Harmon took. Not quite. Yates pulled out his phone, showed us the video file from Antarctica. Harmon watched all 8 minutes of this footage. I only watched 6 seconds before I stopped. You watched 6 seconds and stopped. We limited our understanding intentionally. We refused to see the complete picture. Because we were scared, because we were smart. Fear kept us ignorant, and ignorance might be the only thing keeping us alive. He pocketed his phone. Which brings me to my actual concern about Plan Nightfall. If we successfully contact the warship, if we ask it questions and it answers, we're going to learn things. Potentially a lot of things. And every answer we get might be another step toward the kind of complete understanding that killed Harmon. Walsh stood up, walked to his window, stared out at the dark campus. So what do you suggest? We stay ignorant? Hope that by not learning anything, we somehow survive? I suggest we send the questions, but we don't listen to the answers. Or more precisely, we let an artificial intelligence listen. Something that can process information without understanding it. Something that can't be read by the silence because it doesn't have a mind to read. You want to use a computer as a buffer. I want to use a computer as a sacrifice. We teach it to ask the right questions, pass the responses, and give us only the practical survival information we need, nothing more. No deep understanding, no complete picture. Just tactical data that might help us hide or run or fight without ever truly comprehending what we're dealing with. I thought about ancient civilizations carving warnings into stone, about how they'd tried so hard to pass on knowledge without passing on understanding about how they'd failed, and everyone who read their warnings ended up just as dead. It might work, I said, or the silence might be smart enough to see through it. Everything might not work, Walsh said, but doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way we're trying. He turned back to face us. Yates, you're now in charge of the AI interface. Build something that can talk to the warship without understanding it. Thornton, you're still leading the question design. but everything goes through Yates's filter before we process any responses. And if the filter fails, Yates asked, if the AI starts showing signs of what happened to Harmon, then we pull the plug and hope we learned something before it died. Walsh sat back down. Get some sleep. We start in 4 hours. We didn't sleep. We went back to our offices and worked through the night, trying to build a system that could save humanity by staying deliberately stupid, trying to thread a needle while wearing blindfolds, hoping that ignorance might protect us from something that had destroyed every other civilization smart enough to notice it existed. At 5:30 in the morning, my computer chimed loudly, an automated alert from the telescope array. The darkness had changed course again. Now it was heading for where Earth would be in 3 days. Right when we'd be assembling WhisperNet, right when we'd be asking our first questions. I called Walsh immediately. It's accelerating the timeline. Every decision we make, it reacts. It's not just anticipating us, it's forcing our hand. I know, Walsh said. He sounded exhausted, defeated. Preston just had a breakdown in his office. Started screaming about how the darkness was inside his head, how it was reading his thoughts, how we were all already infected, security had to sedate him. That makes 4 casualties. Harmon, Preston, whoever else you're not telling me about. 7, Walsh said quietly. 3 more in the last 6 hours, all of them people who'd been working on deep analysis of the darkness, all of them showing the same symptoms, perfect understanding followed by death. We need to stop, cancel Plan Nightfall, go dark completely. And then what? Wait to die ignorant instead of informed? At least this way we're fighting. We're not fighting, we're feeding it. Every question we ask, every answer we seek, we're giving it more minds to consume, more attention to hunt. I stared at my computer screen, at the trajectory plot showing the darkness changing course again and again, always staying 1 step ahead of our plans. It's not reacting to us, it's training us, teaching us that understanding equals death, making us afraid to think. Walsh was quiet for a long time, then, "Come to Building 8, conference room. I need to show you something. Something I should have shown you at the beginning." "What is it?" "Proof," he said, "that everything we think we know about the silence is wrong." The line went dead, and I was running through the dark campus, past buildings full of people who might already be dead and just didn't know it yet, toward a meeting that would either save us or finish what the silence had started millions of years ago when it first learned to hunt. Walsh was waiting in the conference room with someone I'd never seen before in my life. Older man, maybe 70, wearing a cardigan that had seen better decades and glasses held together with electrical tape. He looked like someone's grandfather who'd wandered into the wrong building by mistake and decided to stay. "This is Dr. Emil Katcher," Walsh said carefully. "He ran the Antarctic excavation in 1989, the one that found the viewing chamber with the crystalline walls." Katcher smiled, but it was the smile of someone who'd seen terrible things that made smiling difficult. "I've been living in Alaska for 35 years, off the grid. No phones, no computers, no connection to the outside world. Walsh tracked me down yesterday and convinced me to come back. Said you'd all made the same mistakes we did." "What mistakes?" I asked, assuming the warnings were about survival. Katcher pulled out a worn notebook, pages yellowed and covered in handwriting that looked like it had been written during an earthquake. "We spent 6 months in that viewing chamber, watching the crystalline walls, recording what we saw, trying to understand the erasure. 3 of my team died during that time, heart attacks supposedly. But their eyes..." He stopped, swallowed. "Their eyes were open, looking at something." "Like Harmon," I said. "Exactly like Harmon. And after the 3rd death, I finally understood what the warnings were really saying." He opened the notebook to a page covered in diagrams. "The silence doesn't hunt civilizations that observe it. The silence is observation, its attention made physical, made hungry." Walsh leaned forward. "Explain that." "Every thought leaves a trace. Neural pathways firing, synapses connecting, patterns forming in the quantum foam that underlies reality. Most thoughts are weak transient. They fade before they can affect anything beyond the skull they originated in." Katcher tapped the diagram. But when enough minds think about the same thing with enough intensity, when observation becomes collective and focused, it creates something. A kind of accumulation, a mass of attention that develops its own gravity, its own hunger. "You're saying we created the silence," Yates said from the doorway. He must have followed me. "By thinking about it." "No. The silence existed before us. Before the civilizations that left warnings. It's been growing since the first conscious mind in the universe thought about the dark between stars and wondered what was out there." Catcher closed the notebook. "But every time a new civilization discovers it, observes it, tries to understand it, they feed it, make it stronger, make it more real." I thought about Harmon's equations, about how understanding had killed him. The Warship's message, "Do not observe." It wasn't warning us about attracting attention. It was warning us not to feed it. Correct, and by analysing the warning, by thinking about what it meant, you did exactly what you were told not to do. Catcher looked at Walsh. "How many dead so far?" 7 confirmed. Maybe more who haven't been found yet. It'll get worse. Every person who dies thinking about the silence adds their final thoughts to its mass. Their terror, their understanding, their attempt to grasp what's killing them. It's exponential. The more it kills, the more real it becomes. The easier it is to think about. The more people die thinking about it. The room felt colder. I pulled my jacket tighter even though the temperature hadn't changed. "The viewing chamber," I said. "You said you spent 6 months watching it. Why didn't you die?" "Because I stopped trying to understand." Catcher smiled that difficult smile again. "I started watching like a child watches clouds, seeing shapes, making up stories, not analysing or categorising or trying to build models I observed without comprehending. And it couldn't feed on that, couldn't find purchase in thoughts that had no structure." "So the solution is to become stupid," Yates said, "to unlearn everything we know. The solution is to stop thinking in the patterns that make you visible. Stop trying to understand, just witness and let it pass." Catcher opened his notebook again, pulled out a folded paper. "Before I went off grid, I wrote down everything I learned, everything that might help someone who made our mistakes. Walsh thinks you're far enough along that this might still work." He handed me the paper. On it was written a single sentence. "The silence cannot consume what refuses to be known." "I don't understand," I said. "Good, don't. Just remember it when the time comes." Catcher stood up, joints popping. "I need to leave now. Being here in this building, with all these minds thinking so hard about the one thing they shouldn't think about. It's like standing in a room filling with gasoline while everyone lights matches. I've survived this long by staying away from concentrations of understanding." "Wait," Walsh said. "WhisperNet, the plan to contact the warship. Will it work?" "No, because you're not really trying to contact the warship. You're trying to understand what it knows. And the moment you succeed, the moment that knowledge enters your mind, you'll feed the silence more than Harmon did. More than all 7 dead combined." He walked to the door. "There's only one way out of this, but it requires someone to make a choice that no one wants to make." "What choice?" I asked. Catcher looked at me with eyes that had seen the erasure, had watched stars blink backward through time. "Someone has to become a black hole, has to gather all the understanding, all the dangerous knowledge, all the thoughts that feed the silence, and then erase themselves completely, take it all out of reality so it can't feed the hunger anymore." He left. The door closed behind him with a click that sounded very final. Walsh sat down heavily. "He's right about all of it. I've been reviewing the casualty reports. Every person who died was working on analysis deep thinking, trying to model the darkness mathematically or linguistically or philosophically. The people who survived are the ones doing routine work, following orders without questioning, observing without understanding." "So we cancel Plan Nightfall," Yates said. "We stop all research. We go silent." "Too late." Walsh pulled up a new image on the projector, the darkness magnified. "While we've been talking, it's changed course twice more. It's now heading for Earth's position in 18 hours. Not 3 days, 18 hours. It's accelerating because we're here in this room thinking about it so hard that we're practically broadcasting our location. Catcher's solution: someone becomes a black hole, gathers all the dangerous knowledge and erases themselves. Volunteers only, Walsh said. I'm not ordering anyone to commit suicide for I'll do it, I said. They both stared at me. I've read all the reports, watched the viewing chamber footage, studied Harmon's equations. I probably have more dangerous knowledge in my head than anyone except Catcher, and he's already paid his price by living off-grid for 35 years. I stood up. Plus, I'm divorced twice, no kids, no real friends. My absence won't leave a hole in anyone's life except the personnel records. That's not how we decide who lives and dies, Walsh said quietly. No, we decide based on who has the best chance of actually pulling this off. And that's me. I understand enough to be dangerous, but not enough to have died. Yet I'm in the sweet spot where I can gather more knowledge without it killing me immediately. Until it does kill you, Yates said. That's the point. I gather everything, every report, every analysis, every thought about the silence that anyone's had. I become a repository for all the dangerous understanding, and then I stopped. How do I erase myself? Suicide doesn't delete thoughts. They'd still exist in the quantum foam or whatever Catcher was talking about. Walsh stood up, walked to his computer. There's one way, but it's not suicide. It's worse. He pulled up technical specifications for WhisperNet. But these were different from the ones he'd shown in the briefing. These showed what Yates had suspected WhisperNet wasn't a communications array. It was a consciousness transfer device. The Warship, Walsh said. It's not just a ship, it's a prison. According to the deep scans, 98% of its volume is dedicated to containing something that masses more than it should, that distorts space around it in ways that suggest it's not entirely in our dimension. They trapped the silence, I said. They tried, and it worked for a while, millions of years probably. But the prison is failing. The silence is leaking out, slowly consuming the ship from inside. That's why it's running, not from something chasing it, from something already inside it that's eating its way out. Yates stepped forward. You want Thornton to transfer his consciousness into the Warship, to go inside the prison with the silence. I want him to transfer all of our collective understanding into the prison. Everything we know about the silence, every thought that's feeding it, every equation and analysis and moment of comprehension, put it all in there with the original. Let it consume itself. Walsh met my eyes. The Warship passes Earth in 18 hours. If we launch you in the next 6 hours, you'll have time to make the transfer before it's too late. And then what happens to me? Best case? The silence consumes your consciousness along with the knowledge you're carrying. You cease to exist. Worst case? You're trapped in there with it, aware, for however long it takes the universe to end. I thought about my ex-wives, about how they'd both said the same thing when they left, that I was already gone even when I was present, that I lived inside my own head too much to have room for anyone else. Maybe they'd been preparing me for this all along. When do we start? I asked quietly. Walsh pulled up a launch countdown timer. 5 hours, 43 minutes. We'll need to prep you for consciousness transfer, brief you on the upload procedure, and pray that this works. And if it doesn't? Then in 18 hours, the silence reaches Earth, and 7 billion people start thinking about it at once. He stood up. Let's make sure it works. Yates grabbed my arm as I headed for the door. This is insane. You're volunteering for something worse than death. I'm volunteering for a chance to save everyone, I said. Sometimes that's the same thing. We started prep at 6 in the morning, and somewhere in the dark between distant stars, the Warship kept running while the prison inside it grew weaker, and the countdown to 18 hours ticked steadily down. The consciousness transfer chamber looked like something between an MRI machine and a coffin. White ceramic walls, sensors everywhere, a helmet covered in electrodes that would map every neuron and convert the patterns into transmittable data. You'll feel pressure, the technician said. His name was Morton, and his hands shook. Like someone's pushing on the inside of your skull, then everything goes quiet. Then you'll either wake up in the Warship or you won't wake up at all. Reassuring, I said. I'm not paid to be reassuring. I'm paid to be honest. He finished the electrode placement, stepped back. You're braver than I am. Or crazier, haven't decided which. Probably both. Walsh came in carrying a tablet. Final upload is ready. Everything compiled. Every report, every analysis, every equation Harmon wrote, every observation from the Antarctic sites, 400 terabytes of dangerous knowledge that will integrate with your consciousness during transfer. So I'll know everything about it, for approximately 6 seconds before it kills you, or consumes you. Walsh set down the tablet. There's still time to back out. We can try something else. That won't work, and you know it. This is the only option. I settled back into the chamber. Tell me something. When Catcher said someone had to erase themselves, did he mean just their consciousness? Or did he mean their entire existence? Like the stars blinking backward? Walsh was quiet for a moment. I think he meant that once you transfer into the prison with the silence, once it consumes what you're carrying, there's a chance that reality will edit itself. Remove any evidence you existed. Everyone who knew you will forget. Records will change. It's what it does to civilizations. It might do it to individuals too. So my ex-wives won't remember me. Nobody will. He met my eyes. Are you okay with that? I thought about my life. 2 failed marriages. No kids. A career spent staring at stars instead of connecting with people. A personality that fit better inside my own head than anywhere else. I've been practicing for this my whole life, I said. I'm already half erased. The launch happened at 11:47 in the morning. Bright sunshine, clear sky, the kind of beautiful day that made you forget darkness existed anywhere in the universe. The probe carrying my consciousness sat on a modified rocket at Cape Canaveral, ready to boost toward an intercept trajectory. I watched the launch from inside the transfer chamber. The helmet was on, electrodes live, my brain patterns being mapped and recorded in real time. When the rocket cleared the atmosphere, when the probe was far enough from Earth's interference, the transfer would begin. 10 minutes to transfer window, Morton said. His voice came through speakers, distant and tinny. Your vitals are good. Brain activity is. Jesus, you're thinking about it, aren't you? About the silence. You're already feeding it with your thoughts. Can't help it. Trying not to think about something is just another way of thinking about it and giving it power. I closed my eyes. Tell me something mundane. Something that has nothing to do with any of this. Okay, my daughter's learning piano. She's terrible at it. Plays the same wrong notes over and over again, but she keeps trying anyway. He laughed nervously. Last week she played chopsticks for 2 straight hours continuously. I thought I'd lose my mind. That's nice, I said, and meant it. Something about the image of a kid playing chopsticks badly felt important, like proof that normal life still existed somewhere. 5 minutes to transfer window. The pressure started then. Morton had been right. It felt like someone pushing on the inside of my skull, trying to expand my brain beyond the bone containing it. The electrode helmet began uploading the compiled data. 400 terabytes of dangerous knowledge flowing into my consciousness. And with it came understanding. The silence wasn't a creature, wasn't an alien intelligence. It was the weight of observation itself, accumulated over billions of years, every conscious thought about the dark between stars, every moment of existential dread, every civilization that looked up at night and felt small and afraid and alone. It was every fear of nothingness given mass, every terror of meaninglessness given form. It was the universe's anxiety about itself, compressed into something that could move through space and consume the very thoughts that created it. 2 minutes to transfer window. Graham, your brain activity is spiking. You need to calm down or we'll lose the pattern coherence. But I couldn't calm down because I finally understood. The warnings weren't about not observing the silence. They were about not creating more of it. Every time we thought about cosmic horror, about existential dread, about the darkness that might consume us, we added to its mass. We were all feeding it, every single one of us, every time we looked at the stars and felt afraid. Transfer initiating in 60 seconds. The probe was in position. The warship was 15 minutes away, close enough for quantum-entangled transmission, close enough to send my consciousness across the gap, close enough for the silence inside its failing prison to feel me thinking about it. "Graham, listen to me." Walsh's voice cut through the speaker static. "You're about to carry the most concentrated understanding of the silence that's ever existed into the one place designed to contain it when you arrive. When the transfer completes, you need to let go. Stop trying to understand. Stop trying to analyze. Just be aware without comprehending. Like Catcher said, like a child watching clouds. And if I can't, then you'll feed it more than anyone in history. Make it so strong that the prison fails completely and it spreads across the universe, consuming every conscious thought that ever considers the possibility of darkness. No pressure. Transfer in 10, 9, 8. I thought about Morton's daughter playing chopsticks badly, about the simple persistence of trying something over and over even when you were terrible at it, about how that was maybe the only thing that ever mattered. Not understanding, not analysis, just continuing to exist stubbornly in the face of overwhelming evidence that existence was meaningless. 3, 2, 1, transfer. Everything went quiet. Then I was somewhere else. The inside of the warship was vast, cavernous. Walls made of something that looked like metal but felt like mathematics, equations written into the structure of matter itself, and at the center, in a chamber larger than anything that should fit inside the ship's dimensions, was the prison. It wasn't a cell, it was a hole in reality. A region where space had forgotten how to exist properly. And inside that hole, looking out with eyes that weren't eyes, was the silence. It saw me, felt me, tasted the 400 terabytes of understanding I was carrying. And it reached. I felt it touch my consciousness, felt it begin to feed on the knowledge Walsh had uploaded. Every report, every analysis, every equation and observation and moment of comprehension. It consumed them, growing stronger, more real, more defined. The prison walls began to crack. This was it. The moment where I either succeeded or failed. The moment where I had to let go of everything I knew and just exist without understanding. I thought about chopsticks played badly, about my ex-wives who'd said I lived too much inside my own head, about Harmon dying with his eyes open, looking at something no one else could see, about Catcher surviving by watching like a child. And I realized something that Walsh and Yates and everyone else had missed. The silence didn't consume civilizations because they observed it. It consumed them because they tried to fight it, tried to understand it so they could defeat it. Every civilization that left warnings had died trying to warn others not to make their mistake. But their mistake wasn't observation. It was resistance. I stopped resisting and I opened my consciousness completely and let the silence in. Let it feed not just on the data Walsh had uploaded, but on me. On every memory, every thought, every moment of my life spent existing without really connecting to anything. I gave it my isolation, my loneliness, my failures at maintaining human relationships, all the darkness I'd been carrying inside myself for 38 years. And something unexpected happened. The silence paused. It had consumed data before, knowledge, understanding, abstract concepts about darkness and fear. But I was giving it something else, something personal, human-scale darkness. The small, sad kind of emptiness that comes from being divorced twice and eating lunch alone and never quite figuring out how to connect with other people. It didn't know what to do with that. The prison walls stopped cracking. The silence pulled back slightly, as if considering. And in that moment of hesitation, I made my choice. I spread myself across the prison's architecture, merged my consciousness with the containment systems, became part of the walls and the floor and the ceiling, became the prison itself. The silence couldn't consume me now without consuming its own containment. And if it did that, if it tried to feed on what I'd become, it would seal itself inside forever. Stalemate. We hung there in frozen equilibrium. The silence and me. The universal fear of darkness and one guy who'd spent his life failing at human connection, neither of us able to destroy the other without destroying ourselves. The warship continued past Earth. 17 minutes later, the darkness that had been chasing it arrived at Earth's position. But Earth wasn't there anymore in the way the silence could perceive it. I'd taken with me the concentrated understanding that made humanity visible. Without that attention, without that focused observation, we were just another species on another planet, too small and scattered to feed the hunger. The silence moved on, and I remained in the prison, neither alive nor dead, neither erased nor remembered, just existing in a state that refused to be understood. Down on Earth, people forgot I had ever existed. Records changed. Memories adjusted. My ex-wives met their future husbands without remembering they'd been married before my parents mourned a miscarriage they'd had, instead of a son who'd grown up to be an astrophysicist. Only Walsh kept a note in his desk drawer. 4 words, written in his own handwriting. Someone saved us today. He didn't remember who, but he knew it mattered. The warship sailed on through the dark between stars, carrying its prison and its prisoner, and somewhere inside the mathematics of its walls, a consciousness that had once been human kept playing chopsticks badly over and over, refusing to stop existing just because existence made no sense. 6 months after the warship passed Earth, Walsh retired from Goddard. Nobody asked why. Nobody remembered any crisis. The reports about an ancient alien vessel had been edited to footnotes about a metallurgical anomaly that drifted through the solar system without incident. He moved to a small house in Vermont where the night sky was dark enough to see stars properly, where he could look up without feeling watched. Most nights he didn't look up. The note stayed in his desk drawer, 4 words in his own handwriting that he couldn't quite remember writing. Someone saved us today. He'd stare at it sometimes, trying to recall what it meant, why those particular words felt important. There was a gap in his memory. 3 weeks that didn't add up when he counted dates on his calendar. 3 weeks where he'd gone to work and come home, but couldn't remember clearly, like watching a movie with every 3rd frame removed. Other people had gaps too. Yates, teaching linguistics at Berkeley, would sometimes pause mid-sentence and lose his train of thought. Not normally, in the way people forget entire concepts. There was something we were supposed to remember, Yates had said during their last phone call. Something about not thinking about something. Does that make sense? No, Walsh had said, but I know what you mean. The darkness between stars looked different now, emptier somehow, like something had been there and left, taking a piece of the universe with it. Walsh had started keeping a journal, writing down things that felt important, names that seemed familiar, equations that almost made sense, a recurring dream about a transfer chamber and someone volunteering for something worse than death, but whose face he could never quite see. He wrote about the casualties too. 7 people who died in a 3-week period from unexplained heart attacks. 7 funerals he'd attended but couldn't remember clearly. 7 families asking questions he couldn't fully answer. The observatory in Vermont had a small telescope. Nothing professional. Just enough to look at Jupiter's moons or Saturn's rings on clear nights. Walsh used it sometimes, scanning random patches of sky for hours, searching for something he couldn't name. He never pointed it toward the ecliptic plane. Never looked in the direction the warship had gone. Some deep instinct told him that was dangerous, though he couldn't remember why. On clear nights when the temperature dropped below freezing, he could hear something, a sound that wasn't quite sound, more like a distant memory of music, simple, repetitive, like a child learning piano and playing the same wrong notes over and over with stubborn persistence. It made him sad in a way he couldn't articulate. One night in late autumn, he sat on his porch alone with whiskey and the note from his desk. The stars were sharp and cold. The music that wasn't music played in the spaces between thoughts. He raised his glass toward the sky, toward nothing in particular, toward a gap in his memory shaped exactly like a person he'd never known. "Thank you," he said to the darkness. The darkness didn't answer. But somewhere in the cold between distant stars, in a prison that sailed through the infinite black, a consciousness that had forgotten it was human kept playing chopsticks badly, over and over, refusing to stop. And in the silence between notes, something vast and hungry slept quietly, held in check by the smallest, most stubborn kind of existence imaginable. The universe continued on, people forgot, life went on. Some gifts aren't meant to be remembered, only felt.